Hello and welcome to another episode of For Zion's Sake, the CUFI UK podcast. My name is Alex and I'm joined here by Alastair.
Hello.
And this week we're going to be learning some lessons from Eurovision of all places. We're going to be looking at how Israel was treated there and also the public outpouring of support for the Jewish state.
That's right. We're going to give our opinion from the CUFI jury. Plus we're going to be looking at comments from the White House regarding withholding of potentially intelligence from Israel to try and stop it from entering Rafah.
Yeah. On the wider picture, we're going to be looking at good versus evil. I think all of this really does amount to good versus evil. And so we just want to fill you in there, spread the light of truth, and give some biblical insights as well.
So, Alex, there's been a lot of talk over the weekend about Israel at the Eurovision.
Yep.
There was a tremendous amount of pressure upon Israel to be kicked out of the competition. Thankfully, though, Edan Golan, Israel's participant, was not kicked out, rightly so. But there was a tremendous amount of pressure. There was, on social media, a lot of hate from the usual crowd. And it was really, really shameful, the amount of bias that there was, even between, from certain countries' judging panels, as well as a lot of things happening internally within Eurovision between performers, targeting this young woman who was there representing her country. Her safety as well was a great concern to organisers. She had to be, had to remain in a hotel room unless she was performing. It was absolutely appalling.
Yeah.
She came fifth overall, but there are some things we want to draw to people's attention today, isn't there, Alex?
Yeah.
That I think challenges a lot of the narrative concerning Israel's representation at the competition.
Yeah. I think one of the things that you mentioned there actually was the sort of the hatred that was there from, obviously there was people within the crowd who were booing her. There were anti-Israel protests on the streets in large numbers. This is in Malmö, Sweden, where Sweden were the host country, so it was in Malmö. Malmö we know as being, there's been anti-Israel protests there a lot. There's been a lot of sort of troubles within that city regarding sort of anti-Israel sentiment and protests and things like that in the past. But as well, like you said, though,
it also has quite a track record of being one of the hubs of Islamic extremism in Europe.
Yeah. I mean, there's times where Israeli film crews have been sort of targeted and stuff like that. There's a lot of things that go on in Malmö, but as well, like you said, though, even contestants. I mean, the whole theme of Eurovision is about peace and love and unity kind of thing, and yet actual contestants they're hating someone for being different, for being an Israeli, for being a Jew. And I think it was very evident there that there was this hatred that was going beyond logical reason. Hatred probably isn't logical anyway, but what I'm trying to say is with some of the contestants, they were going against the rules of the competition, against the sort of good nature of the competition, and just showing a hatred, like a desire for Israel to lose in every way, shape and form. And actually Israel defied the odds, which was fantastic to see, really.
Yes. Yeah. Well, you come on to defining the odds. It was really interesting that even though Israel scored quite low when it came to the judging panels, the public across Europe placed Israel overall as second.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, this is really interesting because, of course, I mean, I thought the song was good, but had the song not been particularly good, then had Israel scored low in the public vote, we couldn't say, oh, well, it was necessarily bias. We might say, well, people didn't like it. Fair enough.
Yeah.
But the fact that it did well publicly showed that either people were generally supportive of Israel, and wanted to defy the hatred, or they thought that the song was particularly good and deserved their vote. Probably both could be true, or a mixture of things. However, what it does show clearly is that there was a large number of people across Europe who were prepared to defy the bias, to defy the hatred, and to vote for Israel.
Yeah.
So much so that the UK was among 15 countries that gave their first place vote to Israel.
Yeah.
The public.
Yeah, exactly. So the UK, we gave 12 points to Israel. But like you said,
Australia, Belgium, Finland, France, Germany, Italy, Luxembourg, Netherlands, Portugal, San Marino, Spain, Sweden, Switzerland, and the United Kingdom, and the rest of the world, because they have an aggregate vote as well.
Yep.
Also, 10 points, which is the second highest possible, from Albania, Austria, Cyprus, Czechia, which is Czech Republic, Moldova, Slovenia, and even Ireland, which is really interesting because the Irish contestant was very anti-Israel in her attitude towards the Israeli performer, has sour grapes, it would seem right
after
now.
Losing,
should also, I think, be said, was hugely satanic in its performance, demonic, and yes, I mean that in itself, but clearly did not represent the views of the Irish public. That, as I say, gives second place to Israel. And so here's the thing: is there a silent majority?
Well, I don't know about that.
Because I think that there are more people that are supportive of Israel, or at least have a sort of a rational approach to Israel, a more of a common sense approach to Israel, than we are being led to believe by certain sections of the media, by certain sections of the international community, which are highlighting the anti-Israel protest, the anti-Israel bias, and elevating that to a point where it feels like you are in a minority if you stand with Israel. As we said before, some of those votes could have been given simply based on the fact that people liked the song, but that's fair enough, because you're still even if you're doing it from a neutral point of view, you're still defying all of the hatred and the slander and the lies and the bias against Israel, and that must be a good thing.
Yeah, it's definitely a good thing. And I think when you look at it, there are 37 countries in the Eurovision Song Contest. 22 of them gave Israel 10 or 12 points.
Yeah.
So the majority of countries gave them either the highest marks or the second highest marks. Overall, Israel came second, as you said, and they actually got more public votes than the winner of Eurovision, Switzerland, which actually won because the jury vote pushed it so high above everyone else that there was no way. Even Croatia, who got the number one public vote, came second because of that jury vote. And I think as well it does show with like you're saying, the British public and the disparity between the British public and also maybe what the government does at times. The jury of Britain gave 0 points to Israel. The public gave 12 points.
Yes, so, I don't believe that is that's a natural disparity. I think that does demonstrate a bias. I think that bias does exist or did exist over the judging panel spectrum.
Yeah,
but it almost feels like, I know we're discussing Eurovision. We wouldn't ordinarily be talking about Eurovision if it wasn't for this particular instance.
Yeah.
But it does feel as though like the Eurovision judging panel is almost like a microcosm of the sort of the institutions, global institutions that have been established that have an anti-Israel bias.
Yeah, like the UN.
And the European Union. Almost like, and several governments across the world that seem to be out of touch right now.
Yeah.
Out of touch with what the public really feel.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's interesting. Like, who would have thought Eurovision could help reveal some of this to us? But I think it has. I think it has shown that the public is more favourable to Israel than the jury, obviously. And the jury is, I mean, there's been a few examples. For example, the jury of Norway gave some points to Israel. I think about 8 points to Israel. One of the jury members of Norway actually came out and apologized that had happened, and it didn't happen in his name. He didn't choose it, sort of thing. And he purposely said, he was boycotting Israel and didn't choose it. So he was showing his political bias, which goes against the rules of Eurovision. But it shows there would have been other people doing exactly the same thing, but maybe not making it public. Because look at the UK. The UK doesn't have to explain its zero vote.
Yes.
But he had to, because people knew he was on the jury, and they had given Israel some points, and suddenly he was under attack. So he came out publicly and apologized and said it wasn't in his name. The other jury members had voted for it. He didn't. He was boycotting Israel.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the interesting points there. Another one is Finland. There's a video that was circulating on social media of the dress rehearsal of Eurovision. So it's not aired live, but it is recorded. And they were going through the points. And during the dress rehearsal, they randomly assign points to people. So it's made up fictitious.
Okay.
And the Finnish jury had to announce 12 points to Israel.
Right.
And so when she was told, can you please announce your 12 points? She said, Ireland. And the presenter of Eurovision said, sorry, can you repeat that? The woman, then the Finnish jury person said, Ireland again. She said, I think there's a technical issue. Then the EBU director who sort of runs the thing said, sorry, this is a dress rehearsal. We're just assigning things randomly. 12 points go to Israel, that kind of thing. So he addressed the issue and corrected it. So it shows the Finnish judge, even in a dress rehearsal, was unwilling to give Israel 12 points. And the slap in the face to her was Finland public gave 12 points to Israel. So, it just shows anti-Semitism never wins, as they say.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, from the CUFI jury, we gave 2 points.
Yeah.
But anyway, I felt quite saddened by all of this, Alex, because even though there was a wonderful demonstration here of, the disparity between an institution and what the public really feels, or at least some indicators, let's put it that way, some pointers, some indicators of the fact that we are being misled to show that the majority of people are against Israel. But I felt very sad because this was a young woman, Edan Golan, who
20 years old,
who was being bullied. She was being bullied and harassed. Had that been a performer from any other country, there would have been some kind of intervention.
Yeah.
But it wasn't. And so she stood there representing her country, proving the resilience of the Israeli people amidst, such slander. She did not deserve that. But I couldn't help also, this was a song which, of course, the lyrics had to be changed to Hurricane because it was going to be, originally it was going to be October Rain with a reference to what happened, the massacre of October the 7th. And looking at the lyrics, you could still discern that it was making reference to coming from that tragedy. Now, to think that the perception of the world being against this singer, against Israel, if any other country that was part of Eurovision had suffered a massacre of that scale, okay, the countries would be pulling together in solidarity, empathy, and support.
Yeah.
But because it was Israel, not only was that completely ignored, but there was a vilification of Israel. I think that is shameful.
Yeah, I agree. And I think as well, seeing her reaction, I mean, she had to practice with people booing at her so that she would be ready for the night, so that she would, and that's what happened. When she started, there were boos. There were obviously as well a lot of cheers. from the audience perspective at home, we didn't really hear much booing because they employed anti-booing technology. And actually, there was a good amount of cheers as well in the audience. But she had to practice under that. She was under security protection the whole time. One of the acts moved hotel rooms because she didn't want to even see the Israeli singer
on the same corridor.
In the same corridor. That's the. I mean, there was all these different things going on. There was a massive protest against Israel. Anti-Semitic chants, death threats, all these things. She's 20 years old. Her only crime is being Jewish and living in Israel. Do you know what I mean?
I know.
Like if she was Jewish from, like, there was another Jewish contestant there from Luxembourg, no problem at all. It was just simply that fact that she was from Israel. And seeing her reaction as well, like I saw a video of her immediately after singing. She broke down in tears because the amount of pressure and stress as well. When she got home, she was greeted with, a big crowd welcoming her back. Her reaction as well when she got the second highest public vote, that, all of it, like, I think her emotional roller coaster sort of ride that weekend, it would have been quite intense, really. And I think for a 20-year-old to go through all that simply because of where she's born, I mean, in my opinion, it is against the law in the UK and throughout Europe to discriminate based on race, religion, gender, nationality, etc. And yet there were people openly being racist, bigoted, whatever the word is, and these are meant to be people who are, about peace, love, and unity.
Also, you mentioned about the Jewish participant that was representing Luxembourg. I mean, I think had that been public, I think we would have also seen anti-Semitism directed at her. Let's make no mistake about that. But one thing I was going to add was that, of course, 7th of October massacre, a large part of that was targeting the music festival where young people were slaughtered attending that concert. And it would have been, and when you think that here is this 20-year-old woman who was being vilified and abused because of where she's from. If Eurovision had any moral compass, and by the way, I don't think we look to Eurovision as a moral standard in any way.
Not at all.
But it is almost as if it is adding insult to injury. The fact that there was such a hatred. It's very, very sad. But there, Edan Golan represented her country, and I think we should take, and I think she should be applauded for that.
Yeah, definitely. I think she did her country proud. I think the public did, Israel proud. And I think as well, just to clarify some numbers there, like, there were petitions to calling for Israel to be banned from Eurovision that received around 50,000 sort of votes. In Ireland, there was one which had about 16,000 votes and things like that. Not votes, 16,000 people signed the petition. Well, actually, the Irish public overwhelmingly, there was more people voting for Israel at Eurovision than for calling for her to be banned. There was millions of people around Europe who voted for her. Like you said, the rest of the world competition. So what happens is the European votes come in from each of the 37 countries who are participating. The rest of the world is literally every country that's not represented in Eurovision gets to vote. And the rest of the world decided that Israel should get the 12 points as well. So it does show there is a, like you were saying, it might be a silent majority. We're not sure how many people exactly voted and things like that. But with our looking up of these numbers, there was actually an interesting fact that came up. And I think it shows this sort of spiritual dimension of all this. Like you said, Eurovision is not a place we look to for moral good. I think in recent years, it's definitely become actually a battleground for immorality and for things which I would say are spiritually not good. And I think we had probably the biggest demonstration of evil at this event, not because of the anti-Israel aspect necessarily, even though that's part of it.
I think it's linked.
I think it's definitely linked, yeah. But the Irish contestant was the most outspoken anti-Israel person there. And the Irish contestant, if someone hasn't seen it, her name is Bambi Thug. And she is, the whole song, she's dancing with a demon. She's dancing inside a pentagram that is surrounded by candles where it's like a summoning ritual.
Was crown the witch.
Well, yeah. So, I mean, at the end it said crown the witch. She sees herself as a witch. It was full on demonic. It was a full on demonic display.
I skipped.
Anyway. Yeah,
I like the skip on my remote.
Yeah,
I skipped quite a few things in that that Eurovision. But yeah, I skipped that because actually, if anyone hasn't seen it, I would recommend not seeing it.
Don't see it. Yeah, I mean, you can maybe Google an image of her or something. Yeah. You will see instantly why you shouldn't see it.
Yeah.
I mean, it was literally a pentagram on the stage with a demonic ritual where there was a demon dancing with a witch. I mean, you cannot even make up how evil that is. But we found something quite interesting in our research on the statistics because we were looking up how many people vote. You know, how many people wanted to boycott from Ireland, how many people voted in Ireland and stuff. We ended up, our producer actually said that he saw that Bambi Thug came 6th in the public vote, she came 6th in the jury vote, and she came 6th overall. So there's a link to 666 there. And the other thing we did was we looked up how many people in Ireland watched, and this is the official figure from Radio Telefís Éireann, which is Radio and Television Ireland, which is the national broadcaster of Ireland, and they said there was an average of 666,000 viewers for Eurovision from Ireland. You couldn't even make it up. Yeah, 666 on 2 accounts, plus she was literally a
666,000.
Yeah. And then she came 6th.
Wow.
666 overall. So, I mean...
Well, you know what? It does not surprise
crazy.
me because I think underlying all of this, obviously there's a spiritual dynamic.
Yeah.
But there is also an irrational behavior that is associated with the things that she is delving into.
Yeah.
Which does, I think, not delving into, promoting.
Yeah.
Which I think does manifest itself in vile anti-Semitism.
Yeah.
And that is what I think the foundation of this, the genuine hatred towards Israel and towards a Jewish participant is anti-Semitic.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, and she was so openly anti-Semitic, anti-Israel. She actually has quit social media because she couldn't handle the fact that she lost to Israel on the public vote. And Israel came 5th overall, she came 6th. The public massively favoured Israel instead. But also another thing as well is, whilst we're looking at the positive that Israel was voted for by lots of countries, unfortunately in the UK, Ireland did get 10 points from the public. And I think that might show, I mean, there's always a history with the English public always, or the British public, I should say, always favour Ireland in the public vote anyway, because they're one of our favourite countries and neighbours. But I do think that probably is a bit symbolic of the fact that there is this spiritual war going on.
Yes.
And you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You know,
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. And also, probably that entry would have garnered some support as well from the pro-Palestinian movement because of the fact that she'd been so outspoken against Israel.
Yeah.
There's a spiritual war going on, folks.
Yeah.
And we need to make sure that we are on the right course, on standing with Israel, and to really pray for, I mean, look, if the public image is against Israel, we will stand with Israel because we're standing with the Bible.
Yeah, exactly.
But I also think it is helpful to recognize the fact that this loud, noisy minority of support against Israel does not necessarily represent the views of the general British public.
Yeah.
And I think, and I'd like to hope, that in certain respects, the British public have had enough of some of this anti-Israel propaganda.
Mm-hmm.
Generally, the population might be quite neutral when it comes to some of these, to the wider discussion. But I think there are a lot of people who've had enough of the protests, the vile anti-Semitic protests on the streets of London and other cities. I think they've had enough of seeing support for Hamas. And I think that voice needs to be heard. It needs to be louder, and it needs to challenge some of these weak and wishy-washy, wobbly politicians who think that they are being correct by being neutral and sitting on the fence and appeasing these vile anti-Semites when actually they should be listening perhaps more to their electorate.
Yep.
And seeing that actually there is a good cause in standing with Israel and standing with the Jewish people and upsetting a few folk.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, why not?
Yeah.
Why not upset the anti-Semites?
Yeah.
Okay. Because this is part of the battle that we're on. We will not please everyone, but by doing what is right, we will attract more people that actually recognize the fact that we are being misled if we're being told that everything that Israel is doing is wrong.
Yeah.
It's time to get back to the truth. And the media, I hold the media largely responsible for some of this, the mainstream media. We're feeding lies. We're feeding into this propaganda. And we need to pray that people will wake up and see it for what it is.
Yeah, exactly. I think you're right. I think the majority of the public actually wouldn't be supportive of, I don't think they're supportive of the protests going on in London. I don't think they're supportive of what's happening on college campuses, all the rest of it. I don't necessarily think that means they're turning to being pro-Israel. I think they're probably just getting a bit fed up of the negatives, because ultimately, I mean, the evil that we see within the anti-Israel movement, the anti-Semitism that's there, it's not a nice thing. Like, people aren't going to be looking at that going, oh, wow, I like that, I want to get involved. They're actually going, no, I don't like that. This isn't, British sort of thing, all this sort of thing.
Not our values.
Yeah, it's not our values. No. It's not our Judeo-Christian values, our heritage. It's, and I think this is also showing, with society as a whole, there's a lot of things being promoted throughout society which just go against our values as British people. And most Brits are centrist people. They're not politically one way or the other. They're fairly middle of the road on things, fairly level-headed. And I think when you see these sort of extremist voices coming out there, I think a lot of the times they are actually rejected by the public. But the problem we have is the media is trying to be neutral, but in its neutrality, it promotes, the wrong voice.
Yes,
because I think we were saying this last time on the podcast, where if, when you have the anti-Israel lobby, they're not being rational in their attacks against Israel. They are saying all the words they need to say to stir up hatred, genocide, ethnic cleansing, apartheid, all these, murder, all these different things they're saying. They're not being level-headed about it. And in response, we've got politicians trying to be neutral and level-headed, saying, we stand up for Israel's right to defend itself, all this, that, and the other. What they should be coming out is going the opposite way and saying Hamas are genocidal terrorists. The people supporting Hamas are supporting terror. They need to come out with stronger narratives against the thing, rather than trying to be neutral and level-headed. Because, unfortunately, when you have extremism within a society, that extremism, if it is left unchecked, it will breed more extremism. Negativity breeds negativity. It's just a fact of human nature, I guess, where when these messages are continually pounded upon, when that drum is pounded upon, it eventually gets through. I think Goebbels said it, say the lie often enough and people will start to believe it. And I think, unfortunately, that's what we've got. You've got the extremist anti-Israel lobby, which is given too much airtime on the media, being able to spread its lies, while the pro-Israel side is trying to be politically correct and neutral on it. And I think that is why, it's not helping the situation. But I think most Brits are actually fairly level-headed.
And also, it crosses over into the generational demographic as well, because you mentioned to me last week about the views of the college students in the US, and of course this minority, but a large minority of pro-Palestinian protesters that have been gathering at US colleges, but there are some very interesting statistics that you shared with me that actually paint a different story when it comes to students across the board.
Yes. Yeah.
Do you want to just explain some of those? Because I think it also feeds into this idea that there could well be a silent majority.
Yeah, I agree. I think, this statistic, I mean, this is from the Jewish Chronicle, and there was a poll that was taking place between the 3rd of May and the 6th of May by the Generation Lab, and it polled 1,250 US college students, and it quizzed them about certain things going on. And so one of the things they did was they asked the students, they had 9 different subjects, from the environment to politics to the economy to the border crisis to all these different things, including the Israel-Palestinian conflict, and they said rank them in order of importance. Well, out of the college students, the least important topic was the Israel-Palestinian conflict. Think about that.
Yeah.
You know, college campuses are being shut down by protesters, and it's all over the news. Anything you're hearing about colleges at the moment is about these college campus protests, these, nationwide, even global movements of college protesters. And the least important issue for 90% of the students is the Israel-Palestinian conflict.
Yeah.
They also had the majority, 81% of students said that they supported holding protesters accountable, agreeing that those who destroyed property or illegally occupying buildings should be held responsible by the university. 90%, the vast majority, said that blocking pro-Israel or Jewish students from parts of the campus was unacceptable. So basically, the majority of people are against, the majority of students in college are against these protests.
Yes.
And think about it. Columbia University was the first university to sort of gain popularity with this movement. They say that 1 in 3 of the protesters are students. 2 out of 3 are not even students at the university.
I think they've definitely been infiltrated, Alex.
100%. And the, there's 37,000 students that attend Columbia University. There was only around 1,000 that protested outside Columbia, and yet they shut the entire university down and caused them to go to online classes because no one could go to university.
Yes.
So it's no wonder that the majority of students attending college and university in America are against these protests. And yet the media is being a voice for these protests, amplifying them to a massive degree. I think it's the same with a lot of things. I know it's not our remit or anything like that, but we see like Just Stop Oil protesters. The majority of people are fed up with them, blocking traffic and destroying works of art. Like, it is an extremist minority that gets amplified by the media, and the public are fed up with it. And so I do think there is a sort of a growing backlash to this. But again, I would say I don't think it is necessarily turning people to be pro-Israel.
Yes.
I think it's turning people to be anti the protesters.
Yes.
And I think that's the biggest thing we're seeing.
But let's pray that will be a good ground to be able to see more support for Israel.
Yeah.
And let's not lose hope in this current generation, the next generation, yes? Because you've illustrated there that that these protests are not held significantly by the spectrum of students. Hopefully most of them are concentrating on their studies as opposed to trying to attack Israel. But let's not lose hope, and let's continue to pray that a generation will emerge which does counter these trends that we're seeing in other areas of opposition to Israel. CUFI on campus, our colleagues in the United States, CUFI on campus does a fantastic work on university and college campuses in being able to build relationships between Christians and Jews, and also to do advocacy for Israel on campuses. It is a large network of students, of young people who love Israel. And so let's pray for all those Christian students that are representing CUFI and representing Israel.
Yeah, definitely.
On campuses, because it is a battleground.
Yep.
And they need our prayers. But I just wanted to share that because many people might not realize that in the States, CUFI does have an initiative that is trying to, raise a generation of future leaders or young people who are countering this anti-Israel culture and making a stand for Israel and the Jewish people. We are calling upon Christians across the land to sign the Christian Pledge for Israel. We want to demonstrate the overwhelming support that there is for Israel and the Jewish people, to show them that they are not alone. So please go to www.cufi.org.uk/pledge and add your name. We want to demonstrate to Israel and the Jewish people that Christians in this land stand with them, but we need your help. Let us pledge together to stand with Israel at this time. So staying in the US, Alex, there was a report this week that the United States has offered to release intelligence to Israel if Israel does not make a large ground operation in Rafah.
Yeah.
Now, when I saw this, it alarmed me hugely, because whilst that might sound a good thing, that the US is offering this, the fact that it comes with a condition is hugely concerning, because the United States is the closest ally of Israel, right?
Yeah.
And yet it suggests that they're holding back intelligence.
Yep.
This intelligence apparently includes the whereabouts of Hamas terrorists, the location of tunnels. Why is America not already handing this freely to Israel?
Yeah.
Can I read the quote?
Yep.
It says, quote, "The Biden administration, working urgently to stave off a full-scale Israeli invasion of Rafah, is offering Israel valuable assistance if it holds back, including sensitive intelligence to help the Israeli military pinpoint the location of Hamas leaders and find the group's hidden tunnels, according to 4 people familiar with US offers."
Yeah, and I think it's Yahya Sinwar who's the leader who they've got the location of, that they're using as a carrot sort of on a stick to try and tempt Israel away from Rafah.
That is awful. To have that ultimatum when Israel is intent on removing Hamas, when it is trying to secure the borders of Israel, and ultimately the removal of Hamas would actually mean an earlier an earlier end to the war. Let's face it. What is the Biden, if this is true, what is the Biden administration thinking?
Yeah, and this also comes as last week President Biden himself was saying, don't go into Rafah, we're holding back arms, all these sorts of things. I honestly think it shows the truth behind the sort of mask that there is of the Biden administration, which is that they project themselves as being very pro-Israel when actually their actions are the opposite.
Yes.
And there's a good video actually by Pastor John Hagee, who's the founder of Christians United for Israel. He put out a video this week, and he was addressing this about Biden being anti-Israel, and he was going back through history, basically showing how Biden has been anti-Israel from the beginning, unfortunately. Even, when in his 30s, when he was meeting with Israeli leaders, he was, prompting things. And it was even the day after October 7th, on the 8th of October, US Secretary of State Antony Blinken actually called for a ceasefire before Israel had even done anything in retaliation to the worst massacre against the Jewish people since the Holocaust.
Yes.
Think about that.
Yes. And he actually, Pastor Hagee, pointed out that there was a ceasefire on the 6th of October.
Yes, exactly. And then Hamas broke that ceasefire. Yes. So, I mean, just look at that from Israel's perspective. There was a ceasefire. Hamas massacres Jews. The very next day, America says, let's go back to a ceasefire.
Yes.
Let's allow the Jews to be slaughtered without any, repercussions towards Hamas. I mean, that to me just shows a protection of Hamas kind of thing from the US government, Israel's greatest ally. And talking about intelligence sharing, Colonel Richard Kemp, who is himself an expert in this. He led the British Armed Forces. He was the commander of the Armed Forces of Afghanistan. He's been part of COBRA, which is the high-level sort of intelligence group that oversees terror attacks and things like that happening in the UK. He has actually said on record that the Israel intelligence sharing with the UK and with the US is pretty much the best intelligence sharing that there is in the world, where Israel itself has protected UK, British lives, protected American lives by preempting terror attacks, sharing intel and all the rest of it. So to think that the US, again, Israel's closest ally, is willing to use intelligence to manipulate its ally, it is a very troubling thing.
Yes.
And I think it shows, what's behind the scenes there.
Yeah.
Pastor Hagee himself came out saying that Joe Biden was anti-Israel. And I think if we look back at his history, that is true. We've thought it, well, I personally have thought it for a long time.
But it also shows, and I think this is a concern because it's America, as you say, it's the strongest link in terms of the intelligence sharing with Israel. It does demonstrate, though, that there is a reluctance from the West for Israel to enter, not just the reluctance, a complete opposition, but Israel to enter Rafah.
Yeah.
That's also been repeated from other governments. You've got the leader of one of the leaders of the European Union, who has said that the relationship between Israel and the EU is at stake if they enter into Rafah.
Yeah.
You've got David Cameron at the weekend. He gave an interview with the BBC. He said some good things. He criticised the BBC about their failure to use the term terrorists. He spoke about if Hamas surrendered, there'd be a ceasefire, there'd be an end to the war immediately, etc. He said some good things, but he's still harboring on about Israel and, not going into Rafah and really putting on that pressure. The UK hasn't threatened to withhold arms, but he said something bizarre where he said that because it was regarding the aid, he's criticising Israel for not doing enough for providing aid. And by the way, if you visit the COGAT Twitter feed, which is the authority which oversees aid being transported into Israel, you will see daily updates of how many trucks and how many tons are actually crossing the border. That's really, really insightful, and it's a true picture of the aid which Israel is facilitating. So Cameron needs to visit that Twitter feed as well, COGAT, COGAT. But what I was going to say is that he said a bizarre thing when he said that Netanyahu is on notice.
Yeah.
I mean, why? Who gives him the right to put, another leader on notice? Put aside the differences of opinions within Israel or politically on who they select for their leader, but for the Foreign Secretary of the UK to threaten Israel and for the President of the United States to withhold vital intelligence which could end this war is ludicrous.
Exactly. And even, like you said, Biden's withholding weapons as well.
Yeah,
and
I know.
I saw actually there was an Israeli Knesset member who was saying, okay, we won't use the precision-guided small bombs that America's not providing us. We'll instead use the big ones. And instead of targeting one house, we'll hit 10 houses. It's like, if you take away Israel's ability to be precise, which is what Biden was trying to do, then they have to go the other option, which is use the weapons they've got. You know what I'm saying? It's like it makes the war more. It makes Israel's ability to carry out war harder, and that's the whole aim of it. Because in my opinion, there is an attempt to stop Hamas being defeated.
Yes.
I think that is what we're seeing.
I agree.
We're seeing as well, I think, foreign interference with Israeli elections in some way, because there's a big push to try and oust Netanyahu from outside of Israel. And ultimately, it's up to Israel it's up to Israelis who they vote for.
Yeah.
We stand with Israel no matter who's the head of Israel, so we don't really mind who is there. But it is clear there's an anti-Netanyahu sort of sentiment coming through from Western governments. There's an destroying of Hamas sentiment, which is very odd considering the fact that it is these same governments that went against ISIS with a very similar ideology as Hamas, and they went against them without any, they didn't provide aid for ISIS civilians or anything like that. And the thing is, it was under David Cameron who, there was a war between Saudi Arabia and the Houthis in Yemen and the Yemenis government. There was a big sort of conflict that went on there. Under David Cameron's watch, under NATO's watch, NATO provided all the weapons. And we've said it before, there was around 400,000 people who died in that conflict. 88,000 children starved to death because of a coalition of nations, including Saudi Arabia, being funded by the West and provided weapons for the West, where they blocked aid getting into Yemen. And 88,000 children alone starved to death because no aid got there. And the same person is saying to Israel, you're not doing enough, when Israel is literally doing more for its enemies than any nation in modern history. It is absolute, in my opinion, it just shows the spirit behind it, where these people are not being led by God. They're being tricked by the devil into attacking Israel. Yes. And it is this spiritual war that's going on because, Joseph Borrell, the EU person you were talking about earlier, he again is the same thing. He is almost hell-bent, I would say, on undermining everything Israel's doing. And he is the head of the EU's foreign policy. Yeah. He should be on Israel's side completely because Israel has saved European lives from terror attack, right? Even this week, there were ISIS members who were arrested in Britain and they were going to carry out a machine gun attack on Jews in the UK. Yes. I'm quite sure there was intelligence sharing between different nations to stop that. Yes. And Israel was likely involved as well. Yes. I cannot believe really that the Western governments are being so anti-Israel. And this is what it is. It is anti-Israel.
It is.
I would even say it borders on anti-Semitic. And, I just think it is a spiritual thing that's going on here where the West does not want Israel to defeat evil, and it is allowing evil to exist.
Israel is not allowed to win in their eyes. Yeah. And we were talking last week about some of the reasons or speculation about why that might be. But one of the things we mentioned was someone's called it the holy cow. I don't know that phrase, but the holy cow.
Sacred cow.
The sacred cow, sorry. The sacred cow of the two-state solution. Yeah. And the point being made that a weakened Israel is more inclined to accept terms of a two-state solution. Yeah. A strong, victorious, emboldened, and let's use the word powerful Israel in the sense of, defeating Hamas is less likely to cave in and accept a two-state solution. Yeah. So it almost feels as if they don't want Israel to get the job done because it then pushes the two-state solution further down the track. And for whatever reason, and I think it is largely a spiritual reason, they are adamant of getting that two-state solution through. In fact, many in the UN, except for a US veto, want a Palestinian state recognized immediately. The UK, of course, abstained because we like the fence. And, that's the direction. That is what they want. Yeah. And, Israel getting the job done includes wiping out Hamas. Yeah. But whilst Hamas is there, whilst the enclave remains, I'm talking about Rafah or whatever stronghold might remain, Israel hasn't yet finished that job. Of course, we want peace. Yep. We want an end to this war. We want all the hostages released, whatever that might take to get those hostages home and to have peace restored. But Israel should not have to forfeit that under pressure from Washington or London or wherever.
Yeah, exactly. And we say it all along. I'm quite sure the British public wants a ceasefire rather than the Rafah operation. I think that's even true of the Israeli public when polls have been done. And ultimately, we want the end of this war. But the entirety of Israel's allies are putting pressure on Israel not Hamas. And the opposite should be true.
Mm.
They should be saying, and we say this every single week, the war would be over if Hamas put down their weapons, surrendered, and gave back the hostages. The war would end.
Yes.
There would not be a Rafah operation if the hostages were not in Rafah.
Yes.
But we know Hamas, who are willing to sacrifice their own children for their foolish aim of annihilating Israel. They do not care about the hostages. They do not care about their own children. They do not care about their own lives. Israel cares more about Palestinians than Hamas does.
Yes.
And this is the thing. And I would say, we as individuals, we as CUFI, we care more about Palestinians than the anti-Israel lobby do, because they are calling for a ceasefire when they don't even mean it. Because as soon as Iran attacked Israel, they were celebrating and cheering for war. And actually, it shows their heart. They just want to destroy Israel. They don't even care about the Palestinians. Yeah.
Mm.
I think another thing as well, I just wanted to say, there's a couple of quotes I want to give. And they are from some past Israeli prime ministers.
Okay.
And one of them is Golda Meir. And she was quoted as saying that Israel has a secret weapon in all this. And she said the secret weapon is that we Jews have nowhere else to go.
Mm.
I thought that was a great response to basically a call to, trade land for peace and all this stuff. And there's another quote here from Prime Minister Menachem Begin, who was the Prime Minister in 1982. And he said this quote when he was threatened by someone. He said, "Don't threaten us with cutting off your aid. It will not work. I'm not a Jew with trembling knees. I'm a proud Jew with 3,700 years of civilized history. Nobody came to our aid when we were dying in the gas chambers and ovens. Nobody came to our aid when we were striving to create our country. We paid for it, we fought for it, we died for it. We will stand by our principles, we will defend them, and when necessary we will die for them again, with or without your aid." So both of these statements, one by Golda Meir, one by Menachem Begin, I've hopefully said that right, both of those statements were said, and they're very famous quotes, they were said to Senator Joe Biden, when Joe Biden pressured each one of them at different points to give up land, or in this case, threatened to withdraw US aid. And this was back in the 1970s and the 1980s. And today we sit in 2024 with President Joe Biden again threatening aid, threatening to withhold intelligence from Israel.
Yes.
And I think, throughout history, we're seeing the continuation of Biden's Israel policy, which, as far as I can tell, is anti-Israel to the point where two of the most famous quotes about Israel were directed directly at Joe Biden.
And here we are
in
a pivotal moment in history.
Yeah.
A pivotal moment in the relationship between America and Israel's future and its defense and security. And President Biden is at the helm in Washington. And despite giving early signs that he was ironclad in his support for Israel, is showing true colors. Yeah. So let's pray for America and pray for Israel and pray for Britain. Yeah. And shall we turn to the Bible, Alex?
We should, yeah.
Okay, so a scripture which was on my heart to share is Isaiah chapter 44 from verse 24. It says this: "Thus says the Lord your Redeemer, and he who formed you from the womb. I am the Lord who makes all things, who stretches out the heavens all alone, who spreads abroad the earth by myself, who frustrates the signs of the babblers, and drives diviners mad, who turns wise men backward and makes their knowledge foolishness, who confirms the word of his servant and performs the counsel of his messengers, who says to Jerusalem, you shall be inhabited, to the cities of Judah you shall be built, and I will raise up her waste places. Who says to the deep, be dry, and I will dry up your rivers? Who says of Cyrus, he is my shepherd, and he shall perform all my pleasure, saying to Jerusalem, you shall be built, and to the temple, your foundation shall be laid. I just wanted to share that. That's talking about the restoration of Judah, and when it says, he who formed you from the womb, it made me think that actually the creation of the state of Israel, looking at that angle for one moment, being formed in the womb takes place before birth. It was God's plan from the conception of the nation of Israel, the promise that he gave to Abraham, and then, of course, pass on to Isaac and to Jacob and his descendants as the covenant promised. But it was that conception where God made that promise that is the foundation for our stand with Israel over past generations and today and in the future.
Yeah.
It started when it was first created in the early form, in the Bible.
Yeah.
And now we have seen the rebirth of Israel, and we're seeing Israel now grow, and we are seeing it being built up. Oh, build up, Judah, Jerusalem, you shall be built. Yeah, but it started as an early form here in the Word of God.
Yeah,
and our stand with Israel needs to be rooted in the foundation, back to the Word, because it's that. Where it began. So it says, he who formed you from the womb.
Yeah.
Amen.
So God formed Israel.
Yes.
Yeah.
Even before it was born, in a sense. It was sort of like it was there. It was there at the very beginning of the Bible.
Yeah.
And then it says, who frustrates the signs of the babblers. And I looked up the word for babbler, and it carries a few meanings, including liars. But also it carries the thought of idle talk. And if you think that combination of both lies and idle talk, it's like wasteful talk, which is also a lie in a sense. And a lot of the anti-Israel narrative, it's both lies and it is just babbling. It's just wasteful oxygen.
Yeah.
It's just absolutely. I mean, it says that he who frustrates the signs. And it says, and drives diviners mad. This word is actually the Hebrew word for halal, is halal.
Oh, right.
Okay, now that's not to be confused with what we associate Islamically. That's completely different, right? But it's the word halal, and we often use that in association with praise, like really extreme and extravagant praise. But the word also, when it is applied in a different voice, has another meaning, and it means to make fools, to make as if making a madman wild, right? It's still that extravagant and extreme sort of route, but it's as if making a madman wild. And when we saw and it's quite interesting, it says diviners. Now, when we saw like that occultic thing on Eurovision, and we saw that hatred, and we saw the expression of frustration in terms of Israel's success, which is anti-Semitic, okay, that frustration that Israel might do well. We saw her, she said, I'm taking time out of social media.
She cried.
What a 2024 phrase, right? I'm taking time out for social media. Okay, good, thank you. But, it's just that heart of vengeance and frustration that Israel might do. And that's when you see anti-Semites getting frustrated and angry, you understand that there's a spiritual battle going on. And I'll tell you what, there's going to be a lot more anti-Semites get frustrated and unhappy because Israel wins in the end.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, it says he drives, frustrates the signs of the babblers, of the liars, of those of idle rumors and talks, and drives the diviners like madmen.
Yeah, I think that that is a great example, actually. We go back to Eurovision, even though we're talking about the Bible, which always seems odd. But there was such a contrast between good and evil there.
Yeah.
I mean, even the dress that the Israeli woman wore, Eden Golan, she was wearing white with a moon behind her, and then you see this witch lady dressed in demonic fashion, sort of thing. Good versus evil. The fact she was literally crying when Israel got more points than her, this sort of thing. And it is a battle between good and evil. This is what we have to keep remembering. And going back to verse 6, actually, in this, it says, "Thus says the Lord, the King of Israel and his Redeemer, the Lord of hosts, I am the first and I am the last. Beside me there is no God." And so this is God speaking, calling himself the King of Israel and declaring him as being the only God, the one and only God. And I think this is the thing. You've got people who are bowing down to the devil. They are worshipping Satan, and they're going against the things of God. Like, we have to remember, Israel, we don't support Israel because of Israel or Netanyahu or anything political. We support Israel because of the Bible, because God identifies himself as King of Israel. And that is why the enemy hates Israel, because they're anti-God.
Yes.
It is good versus evil, God versus Satan, and that is why we have to stand for truth and stand up for the Bible.
Well, let's do that. I mean, let's speak truth. It's really important that we speak the things that we believe. We confess the things we believe. It says here, who confirms the word of his servant. I looked at the word confirm here, and it means to establish and also to raise up. To establish and to raise up. And the picture I had was sort of like a tent. You know, when you put a tent, you pin it down with the pegs, firmly, but also you raise it up. And that's sort of that word here for confirm. It's to peg it down, firmly established, but also to raise it up.
Yeah.
That's what you get when you get a tent. You know, that's what you do with a tent.
Yeah.
And we are to establish, that his word is established, but we're to raise that up. We're to speak it.
Yeah.
We're to elevate it. And we want to speak blessing over Israel and the Jewish people. Okay? We want to say to Jerusalem, you shall be inhabited. That's a proclamation. And to the cities of Judah, you shall be built. Yeah. We want to build up with our words and with our profession that, no, we're not going to speak down on Israel, but we're going to lift up with our words, and that's going to come from a foundation of believing that God's word is true.
Yeah.
So that was just a thought to share for today.
No, I think that's great. And the building factor, before the Gaza conflict, one of the biggest things that was being said against Israel was Israel building in Judea and Samaria. And I mean, going back to the quote, we're not Jews with trembling knees, that the threat of aid being withdrawn was because of building in Judea and Samaria.
Yes.
And it's like that. Like, God actually commands the Jewish people to go back to their land and to build.
Yes.
And yet that opposition is there. Yeah. So just to sort of clarify, like add some sort of impact to that. Like you said, it is for Israel to build, establish itself, and to be raised up.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And thank you for joining us for this podcast. We do appreciate you listening and watching, and we would ask you to please like and subscribe and comment, to share this podcast so that it can be viewed more widely. And we do appreciate your support. We appreciate your prayers. We appreciate you standing with us. And we always like to create an opportunity just to remind our listeners that we do value support also by donations. It helps CUFI to reach with the truth as widely as possible. And so if you feel led to give, then please do by going to www.cufi.org.uk/donate. There are options there to give a one-off gift or to sign up to become a partner by giving a monthly amount. All support, all generous giving is really appreciated by the team here at CUFI. And we want to do exactly what we've just been saying, to speak the truth and to raise Israel up with our words, build on a foundation which is strong. We know that there's a lot of opposition to Israel. We're not going to waver, though. We're going to stand here, and we are glad that you can join us on that journey. For Zion's sake, we will stand with Israel. May the Lord bless you and keep you. Until next time, take care. God bless and shalom.